In 1966, Mao Zedong declares a cultural revolution. He wants to establish a new form of communism, one that is more radical and far-reaching than ever before. At that time, there are only a few Europeans in China. What is it like to experience the movement from the inside? Far away in Europe, many young people are fascinated by this movement. Holding up placards with Mao's image, they take to the streets in protest against their own governments. It's often romanticized in Europe and remains a taboo in China to this day. What was it really like? The great cultural revolution of the proletariat. The residential buildings of Peking University for Foreign Languages. Paul Crook is from England and grew up here. Nowadays, he lives in London. His mother stayed here. Paul Crook visits her as often as he can. The 101-year-old is one of the few Western foreigners who followed Mao's communist movement passionately in the early days. In 1937, Paul's father, David, comes to China as a staunch communist. The young couple experience at first hand the upheaval of the socialist revolution in the rural areas.
Well, of course, it brings back memories of what was happening then, and I'm just glad that some of it has been captured. I think that's very valuable.
The Crooks moved to Peking at the end of the 1940s. The University for Foreign Languages needs native English-speaking professors at the time.
My parents were very keen supporters of the communist revolution in China. They were treated with great respect and, and participated in life in the university. Up until the Cultural Revolution, mostly, it was a very positive experience for them.
Paul Crook is also inspired by Mao in his youth.
I think I must have been really quite excited about the idea of seeing Mao, even in a distance at a sports event. He was this great idol that we had in our textbooks and that people talked about. Rather like, I think, teenagers or pre-teenagers worship their pop idols,
Mao Zedong has been revered since he established the People's Socialist Republic of China in 1949. In the eyes of the population, he created a new China. Following a century of shameful occupations, wars, and a brutal civil war, he epitomized the sense of a new beginning. For the first time since the days of the old empire, China is standing on its own 2 feet again. The charismatic Mao is the figurehead of communism, celebrated by the masses. The lives of Gudrun Alba and her mother, Basilia Fang, from Austria, are closely linked to Mao's China. In 1951, Gudrun's mother, Basilia, emigrated to China with her daughter, who was 3 years old at the time. Little Gudrun experiences Mao's propaganda from as early as her first grade at school.
I can remember in primary school textbooks, first you learned about the Communist Party and Mao Zedong as the first words you learned, before Papa, Mama, numbers and letters.
As a single parent, in the early 1950s, Gudrun's mother Basilia falls in love with Fang Bing, a Chinese postgraduate engineering student. After their wedding, he wants to help China to become more industrialized, using his metallurgy expertise. He convinces his wife from Tyrol to accompany him to China, an exotic country back then.
Well, we already knew about Africa, but China, totally unknown. It was too far away, but for some reason that didn't bother me at all.
Gudrun Alba grows up with two half-brothers in Shenyang in northern China. Before long, she only speaks Chinese.
Gudrun always felt Chinese. She got upset when anyone said she was foreign. The worst thing for her was having blonde hair. If only she had black hair, then she wouldn't stand out so much.
I felt like I was the devil with everyone looking at me, touching my hair. Some children were curious. They had thick hair, I had thin hair. I had blue eyes. They all had black eyes. When I went out into a new part of town, the whole street filled up. The police had to come and stop the children so that I could get away quickly.
Despite the Mao cult and communism itself, Basilia tries to raise her daughter to be a Catholic like herself. She has brought a consecrated image with her to China as a memory of her home in Tyrol.
But the image, that there, is the archangel, the little one. You see, the one with the wings right there in the picture. Early in the morning when we woke up, we often looked at the picture and talked about it. Yes, that's the angel. He protects the children so that they stay safe.
Back then, the mother and daughter could never have imagined that this guardian angel could ever bring the family into danger. In China, Mao's ideology is penetrating deeper and deeper into the everyday lives of the people. The party leader thinks that industrial development is happening too slowly. He orders a great leap forward. China should soon be producing more steel than Great Britain, with the sheer willpower of the people alone. Even the farmers need to build small furnaces, but while they are toiling away for Mao's vision, their fields become barren. Instead of the envisioned economic boom, there is famine. Around the beginning of the 1960s, between 15 and 30 million people in China, mostly living in the rural areas, die of hunger. The other party leaders rebel against Mao's lunacy and try to limit his power. The pragmatic new head of state, Liu Shaoqi, intends to guide China out of the crisis. In 1963, Irene Eckleben accompanies her husband Walter to China, a country shaken by crisis, as he travels to Peking as a correspondent for ADN, the GDR news agency. The couple are among the very few foreigners still allowed to enter the country.
My husband could speak Chinese, so of course he was sent to China as a correspondent. And since I was his wife, I was sent along too. And people asked me to try and take some pictures. And so I wandered through the streets, endlessly taking photos.
Irene Eckleben's unique photos document not only everyday life, but also the political power struggles in the communist country.
Thousands of infuriated young people block the road. At a crossing, the ADN vehicle is stopped by Mao troops, surrounded and covered in leaflets of slogans.
In the mid-1960s, the country is close to breaking point. Behind the scenes, Mao is forging plans for his return to power. In 1966, he strikes.
Yes, I can remember on May the 16th we had to go to school in the evening and listen to the news. There was the first newspaper from Peking, and the political party leader said that the Cultural Revolution was starting.
At the beginning, there is a handwritten placard, a so-called wall newspaper. It criticizes the party leadership of Peking University for being revisionist. Mao launches an attack on his internal political opponents, saying there are bureaucrats everywhere who want capitalism back. The people ought to display placards and expose these class enemies and their bourgeois thinking.
Then some classmates started putting up posters in classrooms and in the hallways in the primary school, criticizing various aspects of the teaching.
Irene Eckleben takes photographs of the placards. Writing a wall newspaper now means showing loyalty to the old leader Mao, who is still celebrated amongst the people. The insults, mostly against Liu Shaoqi, the head of state, are growing wilder and wilder.
They were put up everywhere, it didn't matter where. Whether at the watchmakers, at the big department store, or at the beautiful Peking Super Hotel. They were put up everywhere, and if you were unlucky, they put them on your back.
Irene Eckleben also takes photographs of how the Red Guards are now forming newly mobilized youth groups. As part of the Cultural Revolution, adolescents are no longer supposed to merely sit dutifully in the classroom, but rather to march for the chairman as part of the Mao youth. Under his authority, they are supposed to rescue socialism in China from its bourgeois enemies within the party, an honorable task.
And many people from our class had to wear these red armbands. And then they made lists of those who belonged to a good family, farmers, workers, soldiers, and those got the armbands straight away.
But Gudrun's Chinese stepfather is an intellectual, so she's not included.
Then I went home and spoke with my mother and asked her what my grandma in Tyrol did for a living. She said she was a farmer. The next day I went to the office of the immigration police and said, I want to have it formally confirmed that my grandma is a farmer, which they did immediately. Yes, okay. You come from a farming family.
And that's how Gudrun Alba becomes the only Austrian Red Guard, a young soldier for Mao. Just like millions of other young people, she wields the little red book carrying the words of the chairman.
Very proud, of course. They had to go straight to the photographer, and we took photos. I came home and my father said, "How did you get that?" I told him. Father said, "Yes, you are very intelligent. That's a good thing. That protects our family."
Mao sends his Red Guards into a war of symbols. He considers China's traditions and culture to be anti-socialist and seeks to destroy them. It's an adventure for young people. They get to storm temples and palaces, destroying and defacing the old images. In June 1966, Mao even closes the schools and universities. The Cultural Revolution becomes a kind of exciting mission for young people.
Back then, I was not quite 18, I think, and it felt like freedom. We were all free. We could run around all over the place and criticize. We went out a lot because it was summer. We went swimming. So for me, it felt like a period of liberation.
In autumn 1966, Mao receives his Red Guards 8 times for enormous parades in Peking. Mao calls on young people to rise up against the alleged capitalist elite and their cultural symbols. Above all, against his political opponent, Liu Shaoqi. Members of the European left wing are also fascinated by the propaganda images from China and the slogans depicting a vibrant, secure socialism that isn't stifled by bureaucracy.
What at first looked like paradise on earth wasn't really. It was in fact a constant struggle. For example, I was studying in Vienna then, and we would never have dreamed of having any kind of allegiance with Soviet communism. I mean, Bratislava or Pressburg is right next door. Just 60 kilometers from Vienna, right? Of course, we were all there. We knew the state of affairs in Prague and so forth. It was really a nightmare. None of us wanted that, though.
Today, Karl-Peter Schwarz is the Eastern European correspondent for the Frankfurter Allgemeine newspaper. In 1970, he joined a Maoist group at Vienna University.
The phrase rebellion is justified wherever it occurs spoke to us so powerfully back then. Rebellion in itself is justified, and the essence of the revolutionaries and, for us, the Cultural Revolution was just that.
Back then, Reinhard Bütikofer, the former chairman of the Green Party, was also interested in Maoist ideas.
The focus wasn't so much on a theoretical system, and at the beginning it wasn't even about a larger understanding, but rather it was the idea that surely a utopia should be possible somewhere.
In protest against US involvement in the Vietnam War, many students become more and more sympathetic to leftist causes in Western Europe. Mao becomes an icon of youth uprising and resistance to imperialism. Armed with sentiments from the Mao Bible, they passionately reject the dusty old elites of the war generation and dream of a more just world.
Being a revolutionary, an admirable concept in itself, is that one must, to a certain extent, overcome a sense of separation between one's head and one's hands. So it's not the case that some people just sit in an office and the others only have to carry out the tasks, but rather the managers also have to take part in the manual work.
Maoist leftism grows especially popular in France. Some young people devote themselves entirely to the Maoist revolution.
My life changed fundamentally when I became a Maoist. I started to see the future completely differently. I was a student of sociology, and when Maoism came into my life, I went to work in a factory.
Danielle Palot was visiting a Maoist group in the small industrial town of Saint-Chamond. She's showing her daughter Isabelle this major landmark in her radical political past for the first time.
We wanted to get to the workers and encourage them to start a revolution from the bottom up. Against the authorities, against the capitalist system, against the employers. It didn't work, but we wanted to apply everything that we thought of as Maoism. We wanted that at least.
Danielle Palot finds employment in a textile factory and tries to inspire the other workers to rise up. The inspiration comes from China.
We couldn't imagine anything better than going to China ourselves and seeing what was happening there. We wanted to get involved over there and apply that experience in France, because we were fighting for a revolution in France and we thought it would come.
But getting a visa for China is impossible. The country is virtually sealed off, apart from the stream of propaganda leaving it.
So China became a kind of projection screen of our revolutionary hopes. It had something very religious about it. Religious in the sense that we needed to go to make that pilgrimage. Yet we didn't know exactly what it would look like when we got there, really. And all the ambiguous information, the less information there was about it, the better, really.
In China, the Cultural Revolution is advancing. Instead of going to lessons, the young people are out in the service of Mao. The Red Guards harass their supposed enemies evermore. A cleansing campaign begins in schools and universities against tutors and intellectuals.
And when I came back to Beijing, my brother said, "You'll never know, they caught a spy in the university. Can you imagine who?" And I said, "Oh, could it be this? Could it be that? You know, there's a suspicious, you know, Yugoslav. There's whoever." But then they said, "No, it's your dad."
As an English professor at the University for Foreign Languages, Paul's father David becomes one of the Red Guards' first targets.
I couldn't believe it. So you know, and they said, "Oh, it must be a mistake, you know, obviously." But anyway, that's the reality. He's not at home.
Although Paul's father is locked up in a high-security prison, Paul's mother, Isabel, does not lose faith in Mao's vision.
We were worried. We were concerned, but also we were told we have to have faith in the party and faith in the masses, as Mao put it.
Mao is now also enlisting young people and workers whose parents are not of the proletariat to fight for him. Various different groups are fighting for dominance. Everybody wants to prove that they are fighting for Mao more radically than the next.
If you were the object of struggle, you had to show humility, and the guards ensure that you showed as much as possible.
People who are considered to be class enemies are being exposed everywhere.
The objects of the struggle were lined up on the stage with heavy bricks holding his head down, and contorted bodies with hands stretched behind the back, and then to say, "I am a monster. Yes, indeed, I tried to subvert Chairman Mao's revolutionary line."
Suspects are confronted with their supposed crimes in huge gatherings.
People were very fervently shouting slogans and condemning them, and I felt very much that I must try and participate in this. But at the same time, I had a contradictory feeling of this is a cruel thing that was happening.
13-year-old Paul begins to lose faith while his father sits in prison.
I think at that time, the parameters of what was shocking and terrible was probably, you know, we were stretched to a point, you know, it's happening everywhere, maybe it's normal.
Alleged counter-revolutionaries are paraded openly on trucks on the roads leading to the public gatherings. Irene Eckleben is still taking pictures. Her photos are some of the few pieces of evidence we have of this practice.
In the middle is a woman with a giant, like a magician's hat in the German and European fairy tales. Like a bag of sweets in the shape of a cone, she is the outlaw. It was frightening, truly frightening.
Radical members of the Red Guard travel from the capital to all parts of China, including Shenyang in northern China.
Nothing but 15 and 16-year-olds, young children, all with weapons, wanting to show us how to go about a cultural revolution. How can you fight against people like that? There's one wielding a bicycle chain, a young girl, around 14 years old, going around hitting people over the head with it. I saw that. That hurt me so much.
The Red Guard is still hunting down symbols of the old society. They destroy anything that falls into their hands. Gudrun Alba fears that her comrades' anger could be turned against her mother's guardian angel picture.
She thought about it, at first wanting to hide it in the cellar downstairs. I said, please don't do that. They might come. They might search everywhere.
Gudrun and her brothers convinced their mother to give up the picture.
Then they tore it down and burned it. I'm not sure exactly.
Well, wood, with a bit of hay, grass, to set fire to it.
Now, only one worshipped idol is left in Gudrun's family.
Then we just hung a lot of Mao photos in the same place. All of Mao. In one room, all 4 walls were covered in Mao photos.
The Red Guards' rage is now out of control. Anyone who falls into their hands is locked up in makeshift cells and sheds. The terror increasingly intrudes into Paul Krug's life in Peking. After already having captured his father, they now target his mother.
Well, she was, asked to attend what if you could call interrogation sessions, sessions to help clarify the truth about my father, but about what she was doing.
The interrogations are endless. In the end, Isabel Krug is no longer allowed to go home at night anymore.
She didn't think she would stay very long, but the next day they came and asked for her toothbrush, and then they came for a few more things, and eventually we recognized that she was not coming home anytime soon.
The Cultural Revolution brings the country to a standstill. There is widespread chaos and terror. At the end of 1968, Mao applies the emergency brake. He orders the Red Guards to leave the cities and head to the country to work there. Around 20 million young people set off ecstatically. It's explained to them that they will learn from the farmers' revolutionary spirit. This is the time when Dieter and Ann-Kathrin Becker come to China as new correspondents for the GDR. As children of the German state of workers and farmers, they have a positive perspective on China and its revolutionary leader.
My favorite is this porcelain badge, a young Mao. At the time, he hadn't committed any major crimes yet. And he still had honest and fair objectives.
Peking is the first foreign posting for the Beckers. Mao had largely sealed China off, even to the other socialist countries. The media coverage of China in the GDR hardly covers the extreme aspects of the Cultural Revolution at all.
Yes, if you look closely, here was a country that had made tremendous progress in the 50s, and I had always been really quite interested in China then. Of course, wonderful things had been written about China in the GDR, and I was really fascinated by it.
And then you arrived there and saw it. And all the excitement fizzled out when seeing operations that were completely pointless. I mean, not completely pointless. Mao Zedong had managed to silence his opponents, but that was all. And all of that was at the expense of the ordinary population. And that is a shame.
Yet the Beckers experienced the start of a new period in China. After years of isolation, Mao ironically turns towards the West of all places. In January 1972, American President Richard Nixon arrives in Peking. It's a political sensation.
It was quite an opening. Diplomatic relations with the Federal Republic of Germany were also starting to take shape, and China was becoming more open to the world. It was previously quite cut off, of course.
By meeting with Nixon, the now 78-year-old Mao was initiating a careful opening up of his country. Now even Mao supporters in the West could hope to travel to China themselves.
There was a German-Chinese friendship society that offered the chance to travel to China. And so I said I'd like to go too. And then it became possible.
When we heard the news that a group of us women might be able to travel to China and see the liberation of women there, well, it was an absolute adventure.
But Danielle Palot now has a young daughter, Isabelle. who is only 3 months old.
I had to decide whether to stay with my daughter and continue to breastfeed her or to travel to China. But I was a Maoist after all, and adventure was calling. It was hard, but I left my daughter behind with her father and travelled to China.
From the summer of 1971 onwards, Mao supporters from Europe are the first to get a visa to enter the People's Republic for socialist friendship visits.
And then you arrive so late at night into Peking Airport, and I remember a giant white Mao statue looming there. Yes, all lit up and so on. And it was like the entrance to paradise. Yes, so you arrive and now you're looking at this huge country.
Western visitors are greeted by large propagandist signs depicting the achievements of the Cultural Revolution.
And then they started to guide us around. We were brought into the Great Hall of the People, an unbelievable privilege. That was our arrival in China. We sang the Internationale, our fists lifted. We were moved to tears. It was very emotional. We were groupies in China. An absolute joy.
Danielle Palot has a 16mm camera in her bag to film for her comrades at home.
The people's communes and the farmers at work, the great building projects, the factories, we'd never seen anything like it. Foundries where the sparks were flying, and the speeches that went along with them.
Overland, from Peking, across country. Stopovers were all the same.
At the schools, one small, chubby-faced revolutionary from the Red Guards came out to tell us a wild tale about the headmaster, and we enjoyed all these things enormously.
Now, so the message went, we have Mao to thank for the fact that everything is more productive than ever before.
I remember a conversation with professors and students. Afterwards, a student came up to me and said he had to explain it again. He said the professors were still a little conservative, so to speak, so you shouldn't hold it against them. But as students, they would really want to change everything much more radically. And you had the impression that you were welcomed as a sympathetic observer of a great social experiment.
Well, the fact that they came to visit, I think, reinforced our general faith that China was a place of world pilgrimage. But on the other hand, if you talk to these foreign believers who had come to admire the cradle of the Chinese Revolution or wherever it was that you met them, then you had a sort of, a suspicion of, you felt they were rather innocent.
The visitors' journeys are planned meticulously to prevent them from going out and exploring on their own.
Of course, we didn't see the horror. We didn't see how people were punished, flogged and executed. But rather, it was like a journey through the Peking Review, complete with illustrations. And you saw these pictures and we trawled through the images and we found it to be exactly as we had imagined. I mean, we didn't want to see it any differently. We wanted to get confirmation that it was good.
I came back with a feeling of, well, if the Chinese are managing to do that, we can do it too.
Danielle Palot stays in the country with her women's group for almost 2 months. They spend a week in Shanghai. Danielle Palot wants to film the everyday lives of people in revolutionary China for her comrades in Europe. The Chinese tour guides have selected a suitable place.
We went to a market there. In the middle of the hustle and bustle of people, there were live fish in bags, vegetables, meat and poultry. Everything was there and we filmed it. It was a dream. Afterwards, we went back to the hotel.
But she left one of her exposed films at the market. The next morning, she went back to look for it.
As we arrived back at the market, everything had gone. There wasn't anybody there. It was completely empty. You couldn't even buy a carrot, no vegetables, nothing. It was totally empty.
This is the reality of Mao's state. The chaos and failings of the Cultural Revolution have driven China to the brink of ruin. People have to queue up for hours even for their basic essentials, and millions of so-called class enemies are still sitting in dungeons, including Paul Crook's parents in Peking. In the early 70s, he and his brothers have to struggle along on their own. Sometimes an adventure presents itself.
I've climbed up there before, up to the second level. The pagoda is quite wide.
So how did you get up there?
On the lightning conductor.
Didn't anybody stop you?
It was during the Cultural Revolution. Nobody was concerned. They were all out starting a revolution.
So you were just wandering around there and playing about?
Yes, it was fun. Nowadays, nobody believes us until they see a photograph of it. Then they do.
Although Paul's parents have been in prison for years now, they have never lost their faith in Mao.
I think my father, during his time in prison, was in this state of mind where he believed that Mao was either misled or didn't know about what was going on, and if he did, then surely things would be put right.
Paul Crook and his brothers didn't know exactly where their parents were held at the time.
Then one day I was cycling to my German class at Peking University with my teacher, and I looked up, and at that window up there, on the second window on the third level, there was my mother waving at me behind bars. So I waved back, but then I thought, I can't keep my German teacher waiting, and I continued on, and I was able to say to my teacher, ich habe meine Mutter gesehen, and I was quite proud of myself. But I felt obligation not to skip a lesson.
After the first shock, the brothers later managed to secretly sneak into their mother's cell and speak to her.
She was locked up under supervision with a couple of young teachers, constantly in the same room with her in case maybe, she thinks they were worried she might kill herself or do some other harm, so supervised very closely.
The lives of Paul Crook and his parents hang in the balance, as is the case for millions of Chinese people. Countless people are locked away. Many of Paul's peers are still in the countryside or working in factories. Most universities are still closed.
For me, living in China was very hard. Wherever I went, everybody looked at me. I always had to be exemplary, a good girl. And I had no freedom, none at all. And then I told my parents I wanted to go to Austria.
But Gudrun is stateless. She doesn't have a passport. She is sent to work in a textile factory and is not allowed to leave China.
Life is unpredictable. And in my father's case, he was a respected foreign friend one day, and next day he had been arrested. But then he came out and then he was exonerated. He eventually spent 5 years in prison in solitary confinement. We didn't even get to visit him for the first 3 or 4 years.
Paul's mother is not freed either until the beginning of the 1970s. Only then is the family reunited. Despite their political persecution, Paul's parents don't want to leave communist China.
For my parents, you know, they were revolutionaries for a world revolution, you know, so they happened to be in China, but they would certainly have wanted us to carry on the great ideal wherever we were, and that was not you know, they didn't feel that we had to stay in China. I wanted to go and see the world for myself, and for me, I think I wanted not to have to behave according to other, you know, strict guidelines, and I believed I would be a lot freer if I went to the West.
Paul says goodbye to his family at the station in Peking.
Before I left, my father said to me, "In the West, there are so many criminals, beggars. If it doesn't work out, come back right away."
Chinese newspapers also report terrible conditions in Europe. Capitalism is right on the edge of collapse.
Then I spoke to my mother and she said, "I came from Austria. I never saw those beggars." It's just propaganda. Don't listen to it.
Gudrun is filled with doubt and says goodbye to her family as she sets out on her long journey to Austria.
It was around 11 days by train. First to the Chinese-Soviet border. On the Chinese side, I only saw Chinese people. After the border, everyone was European, Russians, and me, even the conductors. Everyone's so big and fat and so loud. So interesting for me, my mouth wide open, their big eyes, just like the way the Chinese looked at me.
In February 1972, Gudrun Alba arrives in Vienna. The city celebrates her homecoming from the Eastern Bloc. As a welcome gift, she receives a camera. Paul Crook leaves China for the south.
I crossed the border from Guangzhou by train to Hong Kong. The world was such an exciting place. So I spent 10 days going to late-night cinemas, which I discovered were showing all kinds of Western, you know, Hollywood or whatever films that I'd never seen.
Then I was young. Everything was new, everything was different. And I felt free. Nobody looked at me. I looked just like the others.
On arriving in Vienna, Gudrun Alba soon meets a young student who catches her attention.
There was a spark. He was good looking. My heart was pounding. He asked where I came from, and I said, "Well, have a guess." And he guessed at every European country, and then America, South America. And I kept saying, "No, no, every country." And finally he said, "Hong Kong." And then I said, "Really, really close."
Then when she said she came from China, it was like an epiphany. Me with my thoughts, my communist, Maoist thoughts, and she comes from China. Now she can surely tell me a lot about the system, and it'll confirm what I have in my head already, so to speak.
At this point, Sebastian Alba is a staunch Maoist student.
He said, I don't understand why you came to Austria. China's so good. Then I said, well then, pack your bag. Go there. You'll be locked up by the second day.
Only after Sebastian Alba renounces Maoism do he and Gudrun get married.
She explained to me the full truth of what she had experienced, how it is in China, and that was really sobering for me.
Mao dies in 1976. The masses gather for one last time for the great leader. With this, the nightmare of the Cultural Revolution also comes to an end. Millions were politically persecuted. Mao's rival Liu Shaoqi died in prison. Up to 1.5 million people in total lost their lives. Today, the legacy of the Cultural Revolution still weighs heavily on China. Maoists in the West also had to relinquish their idea of a Chinese utopia. As a leading Green Party politician, Reinhard Bütikofer turned to Realpolitik.
After the Cultural Revolution ended, and even before its formal end, I could no longer ignore the fact that much of what I had seen had been superficial. Or blindness, or wishful thinking.
I worked out that it took me just about as long to free myself from this rubbish as it had been while I was in it. I was in it for 4 years, and it took me around 4 years to stabilize myself somewhat, to find myself again. So all in all, this red decade was a real loss. It gave me nothing.
For the first time in decades, Danielle Palot is looking at the journals of her trip to China in 1971. Of crucial importance are the ones about the fake market in Shanghai.
I feel disheartened. I don't want to work on this film anymore. I've completely given up. I don't understand anything anymore. I don't understand anything. I want to break everything off. Please stop. It must be the same as it is for a child who learns that Father Christmas isn't real. You believe in Father Christmas, and then, just like that, he's not real. That was the shock for me, at that very moment in Shanghai, that there was no hope of finding the perfect society, that there was nothing that we could take back to France.
In China, the Communist Party from back then is still in power. Paul's family are no longer persecuted. Quite the opposite. Paul has accepted an invitation to go to the province and represent his mother.
I brought some words of greeting from my mother, which I will read out for you now.
Kind of a Kafkaesque experience. If it's too much to take to absorb it as horror, you mitigate it by a sense of the incredibly unbelievable, call it comedy, call it satire, call it whatever, you know. And it's one way of dealing with it. And I think that's one way that I was dealing with it, was to mitigate it with a sideways look at reality.
Today, Danielle Palot is living in Paris. She has never given up on the search for ways to create a better world. Most recently, she has been inspired by the alternative Nuit Debout movement. Young French people who gather every evening at the Place de la République and discuss globalization and social justice.
It was really interesting because it reminded me of the early days of the 1968 movement. These are people who live in the modern world and question the system.
She has given up her illusions.
They are completely different. It's another world. They don't believe in Mao or in any revolution. We wanted to overturn the existing society. The people here want to improve this society and make it more humane.